introduce me.
This is Eileen Chaska. Who was your most memorable student?
My most memorable student was my very first year I taught in 1982 when I graduated from Emporia State. I took a job in a small town, and the student I had, her name was Sherry, and she was probably my most influential student because when I was fresh out of college, she was a student. They said they needed to have a paraprofessional with her because they didn't know how independent she was. So they hired a paraprofessional with her to go everywhere, but her language skills really weren't developed. She was not talking in complete sentences, say me, and so I realized probably within a few months that she really doesn't need to have somebody with her all the time, and we really need to develop her language skills and her reading skills and take some of that dependency on another person to be with her all the time. So I myself said, even though this para was hired for her, I think we need to back away. And what do you know? Lo and behold, it really made a change with her. And we started working on her reading skills, her math skills, her language skills, and she became much more independent. And now she is a young lady, a young adult, actually an adult right now, and she has a nice job and she's on her own. Okay.
What did you learn about this student?
Well, I did have to learn some patience with her because sometimes she was someone who had her own mind made up about things sometimes, and sometimes she wasn't reading at all. And again, her language skills weren't as developed, but we really worked intensively on explicit decoding program, math program, and once we started that language development and her starting building that independence, and then being able to socialize with other children, it was so fulfilling. I realized I knew I had made the right decision as to what I did for her, to back away a little bit from being that prompt dependent on another adult.
How did this student impact your career?
I would say that I knew with this student that sometimes she would shut down, and again, she had some of those behavior challenges, but I learned to have some of that patience that I knew. I learned to know to wait, to give some of that think time that she needed, and also the time for her to develop herself and her independence. But I saw a lot of confidence in the end of the year with her too.
All right, next questions. The interview questions. Number 1, how did you get into the field of special education?
I got in the field. I knew as a student in an elementary classroom. At that time, when I went to elementary school, really didn't have special ed classrooms. And there was a student, I'll never forget this, I was in 4th grade, and I didn't feel that the teacher, as a 4th grade student myself, that the teacher really was as respectful to another student in that classroom who you could tell had learning challenges and behavior challenges. I thought she was abrupt with him, and I told myself right then and there, I said, I want to be a teacher, and I want to work with children that have difficulty reading and their own challenges. So I knew right then in elementary school that I wanted to be a teacher, and I knew I wanted to be a special ed teacher.
What was your original classroom like?
My original classroom was right after I left Emporia State University. I took a job in a rural community, and my classroom was really set up as an interrelated classroom. And this was the early 80s. It was children with learning disabilities. At that time, behavior disorders is what it was called. Now it's called a PBS classroom right now. And then I had students that also just had different learning styles. So I had a variety. And it was about 8 students in the classroom. And then I did have a paraprofessional. And she was originally a paraprofessional for one student. But now, when we started building independence with her, my paraprofessional worked with all the students in the classroom. They also had their home rooms that they went to, so I didn't have my own home room. So it was more like an interrelated classroom with different exceptionalities.
How many students were on your caseload?
Well, my very first year there were 8. And there were 8 students in my very first year on there. I've had more, but my first year, I've had up to 22 on my IEP caseload, even more, 24. But that particular year, because when I went to Wichita Public Schools, I had quite a few more. But when I taught in Norwich, I had 8 on my caseload.
What was your service delivery model?
With special education, and it was interrelated classroom, so I had different exceptionalities of students. Again, students with learning disabilities, some behavioral challenges, some students intellectual disabilities. So I had a variety of students that I worked with my first year.
Number 3, what were your major roles and responsibilities?
My major roles and responsibilities were, of course, to write individual education plan or IEPs, to progress monitor students, of course, work with students and teach them how to read and teach them how to math and do writing. My very first year when I was teaching, I had someone from the State Department come in and took one of my IEPs and came into the classroom, and we were being audited. I had no idea what that meant, but I happened to be teaching one of the goals that was on one of the students' IEPs, so that was a good plus. But that classroom was a smaller classroom, it was in a rural community.
Okay, what policies, people, and ideas have had the biggest influence on your career?
I would say the policies of right now, knowing that all students are general education students first, and that the importance of including students in with their general education peers for some of the instruction, but also knowing too that they have explicit instruction that they can receive too, some more instruction that they will need to help build some of those skills and some of those deficits, because we want to learn to build independence with students, and we want them to feel that they are part of their general education peers classroom too. So that policy of all students are general education students first is very important, and accepting least restrictive environment, knowing that students exposed with their other peers, and just giving them the opportunity to develop those skills to go out there in that world and be a person that's productive with their in society.
All right. What has had the biggest positive impact on the field of special education?
I would say the biggest positive impact is some of the direction we're going with MTSS now, because with MTSS, we are coming up with all sorts of progress monitoring. We're keeping so much more data on all learners, and we are monitoring them not just academically, we're progress monitoring them socially. And with that, we're moving into how can we really work with these students to help develop these skills, yet also have them with the opportunity for everybody to learn and work together. Also, what's been great is working in cooperative learning. I think that is the greatest thing. When a student is in the classroom, how can that student work with everybody together in different heterogeneous groupings? And some of that can be done with cooperative learning too.
All right. What had the biggest negative impact on the field of special education?
Well, I think that goes back to not everyone understanding that a student that has an individual education plan or a student with a disability, the understanding of what that disability is, and that when that student is working in the classroom, he or she may need accommodations. They may not, they may need them. So that should be provided. But also in turn, because a student has an individual education plan, does not mean they need to be isolated from their peers. Because sometimes what's happened is that a students will go into their classroom, let's say it's a third grade classroom with their peers, and what happens sometimes is you have a special ed teacher or para take a group of students that have IEPs and just work with those. And that's really not what a cohesive classroom should look like. It should be everybody working together with all learners, and then there's times to work with them too to get some of that more intensive instruction that they need.
Right. And what advice do you have for practitioners entering the field?
My advice is to actually go in and shadow people. Go in and see how all different children learn, and get ideas from other teachers, and get ideas of various learning styles. Talk to general education teachers, talk to special education teachers, and see how they work together. See how they build that communication system. See how they build that progress monitoring together. And see how you can know what really impacts all learners is to be able to go in there and start shadowing and getting that opportunity to do that and starting to build some ideas from there.
All right. Thank you, Eileen Chaska.
You're welcome.